My dear brothers and sisters, the first habit that can make a heart spiritually ugly is neglecting the remembrance of Allah, or dhikr, a practice that serves as the nourishment and cleansing for the soul. A heart that forgets Allah becomes like a garden left untended, overrun with weeds, dry soil, and withering plants, unable to produce the fruits of faith, patience, and compassion. The Quran reminds us in Surah Ar-Ra'd that those who believe and whose hearts find rest in the remembrance of Allah, surely in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find peace. Neglecting this vital connection not only weakens faith, but leaves the heart vulnerable to the distractions and temptations of the world, making it easy for arrogance, envy, and heedlessness to take root. Just as the body cannot survive without sustenance, the heart cannot thrive without being nourished by the constant awareness of its Creator, and failure to engage in this remembrance gradually hardens it, causing spiritual insensitivity. When a person neglects dhikr, life begins to feel hollow, and the heart becomes restless despite material comfort or outward success. A person may find themselves complaining, feeling dissatisfied, or seeking fulfillment in fleeting pleasures, unaware that the true source of contentment lies in turning to Allah. The constant preoccupation with worldly matters creates a veil between the heart and divine guidance, dulling the ability to recognize blessings and misguiding the soul into impatience, frustration, or despair. Every unmindful thought, every day spent without reflection, and every prayer offered mechanically, without sincerity, chips away at the heart's capacity to connect with the divine, leaving it vulnerable to negative influences that can distort perception and character. Neglecting remembrance also weakens the heart's moral compass. Without dhikr, the soul becomes less sensitive to ethical guidance and the consequences of actions. A person may speak harshly, act selfishly, or become indifferent to the suffering of others because the heart has grown distant from the source of compassion, mercy, and wisdom. The Quran warns that hearts can become hardened, like stones, when turned away from divine guidance, and this hardening begins subtly, through small lapses in mindfulness and the gradual abandonment of remembrance. A spiritually neglected heart may rationalize wrongdoing, overlook injustice, or prioritize personal gain over obedience to Allah, all while unaware that these patterns are slowly corrupting its essence. Real-life examples show how neglecting dhikr can impact daily life. Consider a person who starts each day rushing through tasks without reflection or prayer, constantly distracted by social media, work, or entertainment. Over time, they notice dissatisfaction, irritability, and a lack of purpose. Even acts that once brought joy or peace feel empty. By contrast, those who actively engage in remembrance, even briefly, experience a sense of grounding, clarity, and resilience in the face of challenges. The difference is not always external but deeply internal. A heart engaged with Allah's remembrance responds with patience, empathy, and gratitude, while a heart that ignores dhikr becomes increasingly brittle, reactive, and spiritually impoverished. Dhikr also strengthens resilience against life's trials. When difficulties arise, a heart accustomed to remembering Allah recognizes that hardships are part of His plan, that patience is rewarded, and that divine support is ever present. Neglecting remembrance deprives the soul of this anchor, leaving it prone to fear, despair, or anxiety when challenges emerge. A spiritually nourished heart, on the other hand, draws strength, hope, and guidance from its connection to Allah, enabling the believer to navigate difficulties with composure, faith, and clarity. The habit of neglecting dhikr is therefore more than a missed spiritual practice. It is the first step toward a heart becoming spiritually ugly, distant from mercy, peace, and divine guidance. It sets the stage for other harmful habits, creating a cumulative effect that weakens faith, clouds judgment, and prevents the heart from experiencing the profound contentment and clarity that comes from sincere remembrance of Allah. The second habit that can make a heart spiritually ugly is holding grudges and harboring anger, a condition that poisons the soul and prevents spiritual growth. When a person clings to resentment, bitterness, or past injustices, the heart becomes heavy and darkened, unable to experience the lightness and clarity that comes from forgiveness and mercy. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes the importance of forgiveness, reminding us that those who restrain anger and forgive others will be rewarded, and that holding on to grudges only weakens the soul and distances it from Allah's guidance. Anger, when left unchecked, clouds judgment, leads to rash decisions, and fosters a sense of entitlement or self-righteousness. Over time, this habitual resentment begins to reshape the heart, altering perceptions, reactions, and even interactions with others, creating a cycle of spiritual deterioration that is difficult to break. A heart filled with anger or resentment becomes less responsive to divine reminders, more critical of others, and less able to feel compassion or gratitude. Every interaction is filtered through a lens of suspicion, bitterness, or defensiveness, preventing the believer from experiencing genuine connections or empathy. Just as a stagnant river becomes murky and inhospitable to life, a heart consumed by grudges stagnates spiritually, ugly, unable to flourish or receive mercy. The Quran highlights that hearts hardened by ill will and anger are vulnerable to arrogance, jealousy, and immorality, illustrating how negative emotions can distort behavior and diminish the capacity for worship, reflection, and righteous action. Real-life examples show the impact of resentment on the heart. Consider someone who has been wronged by a friend, family member, or colleague, and chooses to dwell on the hurt for years, replaying the events and nurturing anger. This person may outwardly appear composed, yet internally, the heart becomes burdened, restless, and spiritually fatigued. The negative energy consumes attention, reduces the ability to empathize with others, and even disrupts personal peace. In contrast, a heart that learns to forgive, let go, and trust Allah's justice experiences liberation, inner peace, and renewed clarity. Forgiveness is not only an act of kindness toward others, but a cleansing of the self, a removal of spiritual toxins, and an invitation for divine mercy to flow freely. Anger and grudges also hinder growth and block blessings. A person who remains fixated on past wrongs may miss opportunities for reconciliation, guidance, or spiritual advancement. The Quran reminds us that those who pardon and show patience will find their hearts elevated, their burdens eased, and their connection with Allah strengthened. Spiritual growth requires a heart that is receptive, flexible, and open to mercy, yet anger tightens the chest, hardens the mind, and narrows perception. By holding on to resentment, the believer inadvertently isolates himself from the light of divine guidance and the peace that accompanies surrender and trust in Allah's wisdom. Moreover, the habit of harboring anger affects not only the inner self, but also relationships with others. It perpetuates cycles of conflict, distrust, and negativity, creating environments where compassion, empathy, and love cannot flourish. Every unresolved grievance reinforces patterns of bitterness, making the heart increasingly insensitive to kindness, reminders of Allah, and opportunities for personal growth. Conversely, embracing forgiveness and actively working to release anger restores balance, revitalizes relationships, and strengthens spiritual resilience. Developing the habit of forgiveness and patience is essential to cleansing the heart. It requires conscious effort, prayer, reflection, and the humility to accept that ultimate justice rests with Allah. Letting go of resentment frees the soul, restores peace, and aligns the heart with divine mercy, preparing it to receive blessings, guidance, and spiritual clarity. Anger and grudges are not merely emotional challenges, they are destructive habits that, if left unchecked, gradually make the heart spiritually ugly, dull, and distant from the light of faith, highlighting the urgent need to confront and remedy this condition before it becomes deeply entrenched. The third habit that makes the heart spiritually ugly is excessive attachment to worldly desires, a condition that dulls sensitivity to faith, empathy, and the higher purpose of life. When a person prioritizes material wealth, personal gratification, or social approval over spiritual growth, the heart begins to lose its natural vibrancy, becoming distracted, restless, and insatiable. The Quran warns against being deceived by the allure of worldly life, emphasizing that those who focus solely on fleeting pleasures often neglect their eternal well-being. A heart consumed by the pursuit of material gain becomes blind to gratitude, arrogance replaces humility, and the capacity for sincere worship diminishes. Over time, this excessive attachment shapes thought patterns, behavior, and relationships, creating an inner environment in which spiritual decay can flourish. Excessive desire for worldly comforts or status fosters a sense of dissatisfaction and comparison. A person constantly measuring success by possessions, achievements, or recognition can never truly feel content, as the horizon of desire continually expands. Each achievement or acquisition may bring temporary pleasure, but it cannot nourish the soul or fulfill the deeper need for meaning and connection with Allah. The heart begins to resemble a vessel with a hole, endlessly trying to fill itself with things that cannot satisfy. This spiritual hunger, when ignored, leads to restlessness, anxiety, and even moral compromise, as the individual may prioritize personal benefit over righteousness, ethics, or compassion. Real-life examples highlight how worldly attachment impacts the heart. Consider someone who works tirelessly to accumulate wealth, status, or recognition, often sacrificing time for prayer, family, or reflection. Despite apparent success, they may feel emptiness, disconnection, or dissatisfaction. Their heart becomes increasingly preoccupied with what it lacks or desires, making them less responsive to divine reminders and more reactive to external circumstances. Conversely, those who moderate their attachment to worldly goods, recognizing their transient nature and prioritizing faith and good deeds, experience a lighter, more receptive heart. This heart is capable of gratitude, humility, and connection with Allah, seeing life through a lens of purpose, rather than distraction. Excessive attachment also dulls empathy and sensitivity toward others. A heart preoccupied with its own desires may overlook the suffering of those around it, fail to act on opportunities to assist others, or become judgmental and self-centered. The Quran reminds believers that true richness is measured by contentment, generosity, and closeness to Allah, not by material wealth or status. By allowing worldly desires to dominate, the believer risks cultivating a heart that is indifferent, shallow, and spiritually rigid, incapable of responding to the call of compassion, service, or gratitude. Furthermore, this habit limits the ability to trust Allah's plan. A person overly attached to material outcomes may panic when challenges arise, believing that their happiness or security depends solely on worldly success. Fear, anxiety, and obsession with control dominate the mind, reducing reliance on Allah and preventing the heart from finding true peace. The Quran reminds believers that provision, sustenance, and success are in Allah's hands, and reliance on Him brings contentment that worldly pursuits cannot replicate. By overvaluing the temporary and undervaluing the eternal, the heart becomes spiritually distorted, unable to recognize blessings, opportunities, or the guidance that Allah places in daily life. Breaking free from excessive attachment requires awareness, discipline, and a conscious effort to prioritize faith, gratitude, and purpose over fleeting desires. Regular reflection on the impermanence of worldly life, sincere worship, and charitable actions nurtures the heart, restoring its vibrancy and sensitivity. By letting go of the obsession with material gain and embracing moderation and reliance on Allah, the heart can regain its natural beauty, becoming receptive to mercy, spiritual growth, and the profound blessings that come from prioritizing what is eternal over what is temporary. The fourth habit that can make a heart spiritually ugly is engaging in gossip, backbiting, and harmful speech, a practice that corrodes both the soul and the environment around it. When a person speaks ill of others, spreads rumors, or indulges in idle talk that damages reputations, the heart gradually loses its purity, compassion, and humility. The Quran sternly warns against such behavior, emphasizing that slander and backbiting are equivalent to eating the flesh of one's own brother, illustrating the profound spiritual toxicity of these actions. Words have power. They can uplift, heal, and inspire, or they can wound, corrupt, and destroy. A habit of harmful speech not only harms others, but gradually embeds itself into the character, leaving the heart hardened, insensitive, and disconnected from the guidance of Allah. Engaging in gossip often begins subtly, with casual comments or seemingly harmless conversations, but over time it fosters judgmental thinking, arrogance, and resentment. A person who constantly evaluates and criticizes others in speech also begins to see the world through a lens of suspicion and negativity, cultivating an inner environment where envy, pride, and impatience thrive. The heart becomes preoccupied with comparison, judgment, and self-righteousness, leaving little space for reflection, gratitude, or empathy. This spiritual dulling is not always visible outwardly, yet internally the soul becomes weighed down with toxicity, making it increasingly difficult to recognize blessings, respond to divine guidance, or maintain sincerity in worship. Real-life experiences illustrate the destructive impact of harmful speech on the heart. Consider someone who frequently engages in gossip at work or in social circles. They may feel temporarily entertained or influential, yet over time they notice increased stress, navigate life's challenges with resilience and faith. Real-life examples show the impact of spiritual neglect. A person who has gradually abandoned prayer may notice irritability, dissatisfaction, or anxiety creeping into daily interactions. Their sense of purpose may diminish, and even moments of blessing may feel hollow, because they are not connected to the heart's source of nourishment. Conversely, those who maintain prayer, dhikr, and sincere acts of worship, even amidst busy lives, experience peace, clarity, and resilience. Worship strengthens the heart, creates a sense of accountability, and opens the soul to divine mercy, ensuring that the believer can navigate challenges with faith rather than fear. This demonstrates that neglecting worship is not only a missed opportunity for spiritual growth, but also a condition that fosters inner weakness and vulnerability to the distractions and corruptions of worldly life. Neglecting acts of worship also impairs moral sensitivity. A heart that is distant from prayer becomes less alert to wrongdoing, less responsive to ethical guidance, and more prone to rationalizing harmful behavior. The Quran repeatedly links obedience and remembrance to protection from sin and spiritual decay, indicating that consistent worship cultivates a heart capable of discernment, empathy, and moral strength. A spiritually neglected heart, however, grows insensitive, selfish, and disconnected from the values that nurture righteous living. Over time, this can lead to habits that compound spiritual ugliness, such as arrogance, gossip, resentment, and excessive attachment to worldly desires, creating a cumulative erosion of faith and character. Renewing commitment to prayer and worship revitalizes the heart. It reconnects the soul to Allah, restores inner balance, and cultivates patience, gratitude, and humility. Each prayer, act of reflection, or moment of dhikr serves as a spiritual cleanse, removing darkness and filling the heart with light, purpose, and receptivity to divine guidance. Worship also strengthens hope, helping the believer trust Allah's plan, recognize blessings, and respond to life's challenges with composure and faith. The practice of sincere worship is a protective barrier, ensuring that the heart remains tender, receptive, and aligned with Allah's guidance, even amidst trials, temptations, and distractions. Neglecting prayer is therefore not a trivial lapse. It is a habit that erodes the heart's beauty, vitality, and capacity to connect with the divine. Recommitting to worship restores the soul, purifies intentions, and creates a fertile ground for mercy, clarity, and spiritual growth. By nurturing this habit and integrating sincere acts of devotion into daily life, the believer transforms a heart that has grown spiritually weak into one that radiates faith, compassion, and readiness to embrace Allah's guidance, blessings, and the deeper fulfillment that comes from a life devoted to Him.